Hello and welcome into the Fantasy Sanctuary. Hope you're all doing well. I have got a very special show for you today. We have done the positional previews. We're going to look at some guys that were potentially missed out, some sleepers, if you will. I am joined by one of the best and brightest minds in the UK fantasy football industry, Matt. As you may know him at Matt FF Dynasty, he is 1/3 of the fantasy wildcard. Matt, how are you doing?
Yeah, doing really well. Thanks, Rich. It's a pleasure to come on and talk some sleepers with you. To be honest, this is one of my favourite subjects to talk about because when you talk about sleepers, you can't really lose, can you? Because it's one of those, nobody really expects too much from these sleepers. But if we nail one of these guys, Rich, then we're gonna be victory lapping for a long time. So absolutely love talking sleepers. Love digging into the guys that maybe not a lot of people are talking about or know about. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. It's win-win, isn't it? Because
Absolutely.
We're telling people these are third, fourth, maybe even later round draft picks. It's like, okay, that 99 times out of 100 they're not going to hit, but if you nail it, it could be Arian Foster 2.0. I suppose you're probably too young, Matt, to remember how good Arian Foster was as a dynasty pick, but yeah, that was a pretty special one. So we'll dive straight in. Basically, what we've done is obviously we've been through the positional previews. We've talked about a lot of players. I tasked Matt with, this is the list of players we talked about. You need to pick out 3 players that you want to talk about, and then I picked out 3 that I wanted to talk about. So some of these might not necessarily be super deep sleepers, but they're basically guys that we've not talked about before. So we'll start with one who I think calling him a sleeper is a little bit unfair, shall we say. I think he's definitely not a sleeper. Tyjae Spears, I think he is certainly flying up draft boards over the last couple of months. Obviously, pretty impressive kind of post-season workouts and some of the Senior Bowl stuff and things like that. A mind-blowing 2022 year, I think, is fair to say, as you can see on the screen. Huge amounts of production last year. Are you a Tyjae Spears believer, Matt?
Absolutely, Rich. To be honest, like you said, we can't really class him as a sleeper anymore. I think maybe back in January, I think, we could have got away with sleeper, but like you've mentioned, the hype's just been building and building. But yeah, he's a guy that I really like. I remember recently, or maybe in the last month or so, I put a tweet out of a video of Tyjae Spears doing this unbelievable jump cut. It was like literally a glitch out of the Madden game. It was so surreal. It didn't feel like it was actually real life, but yeah, this is one guy that his elusiveness is unbelievable. Like you mentioned, looking at the stats on the screen, you look at the missed tackles forced. I mean, this guy is super hard to bring down. He's always making that first man miss, and that's obviously really exciting when you're talking about these running backs. As I mentioned, those jump cuts are something to enjoy. And like you mentioned, when it comes into the NFL, I think he's going to be having a lot of these kind of clips where people are posting the clips of this guy making these unbelievable plays. So I'm really excited to see what he can do when he comes into the NFL. Like you mentioned, that 2022 season was brilliant, over 1,500 rushing yards. The fact that he is a slightly smaller back at, 5'10", just over 200 pounds, but he's been really, really solid through the running game. I think the receiving game is maybe the one area I'd like to see a little bit more from him. Like you see again on the screen, 22 receptions, just over 250 yards. So I think that's the one area I'd like to just see him maybe be used a little bit more. I don't know about how you feel on him, Rich, but when you watch the tape, I think he's okay at the receiving side of the game, but I just don't think he's got that elite ceiling to him. And I think with his size, I just worry that maybe he could be penciled into that kind of third down running back and maybe not getting those kind of opportunities in the running game where he's excelled in college. So yeah, he's a guy that I'm super excited about seeing where he lands in the NFL, what kind of draft capital he gets. But as I say, I think we're going to be seeing plenty of clips of him when he does get the opportunity to get on the field.
Yeah, it's really interesting you said that. In my rookie guide, the first line I say about him, I said, if you watch one play of Spears, you'd be super excited. He'd be fast, quick, dynamic threat wherever he got the ball in his hands. Player that could score from anywhere on the field. However, the more you watch, you begin to believe that this is not just the case. I think that's it. He's a highlight waiting to happen. Yeah. But sadly, those highlights are on every play. And I think that the more you watch him, the more you get used to, you see some flaws. You see, that size start to potentially wane a little bit in terms of the contact balance. I don't think is above average. I'd say he's slightly below average in that aspect. The receiving game is a serious concern. I think I talked about with Dave Wright on our running back preview. You sort of have 3 types of receivers. You've got your true receivers that can line up out wide, that can, run routes as a receiver, be used out of the slot, add something to the game. You've got your players that can basically catch checkdowns and screens, or you've got your players that can't do anything. And I think Tyjae Spears probably falls in the latter two of those categories. I think it'd probably be a bit harsh to say he can't do anything, but he's not a player that you're going to see out on any sort of complex routes. You're not going to see him, lined up out wide, certainly. Yes, he can catch some checkdowns. Yes, he can catch some screens. But that, combined with, as you said, slightly smaller back, it does leave a little bit of a concern, a little bit of a worry for me. I mean, I really like him. He's my RB5 in the class at the moment. I think there's a lot to like, but I think it's going to, for me, a lot of him relies on what the NFL think. If he gets that day 2 draft capital, then I think, right, okay, he's going to get a role. He's not going to be kind of pigeonholed, but I just worry that he's almost he needs to be a 1A, 1B.
Yeah. If
he gets less than that, he's never going to be fantasy relevant, because I don't think he's the kind of player that's going to get, third down usage, or he's not a first, second down bully as such. So there is definitely some risk in his profile. There's definitely some risk him going to the NFL. But as you said, there's a lot to like, and I am really excited about him. And I think you hit the nail on the head earlier when you were saying about his price has certainly been creeping up since January, and it feels like it's, I'm sort of saying that he's my RB5. We talked about at the beginning of this, he's RB8 in ADP. DLF are about to release the April ADP, and he's already in the top 5 in terms of rookie ADP there. So he's definitely starting to climb up, and I do worry that the price is going to get to a point where you're having to take him at the beginning of second rounds, and that's nervy for me. Is he a player that you think is landing spot dependent rather than just perhaps draft capital dependent?
Yeah, I think landing spot's obviously going to be critical for somebody like Spears. I think you touched on it perfectly. The way that he's produced in college and how maybe the NFL views him could be two totally different things. And like you mentioned, I think the one way I'd like to see him use is maybe, obviously he's not the similar build as somebody like this, but a Tony Pollard, a guy that's kind of seeing a 50-50 split with another back, but not just being penciled into that third down receiving role. He's actually doing running and receiving. I think he can do both of those, but I would like to see him used in the rushing game, because like we've touched upon, I think that's the key area where he excels as a runner. Is really solid. You look at the yards after contact per attempt, it's 4.55, I believe, which is 4th amongst the 2023 eligible running backs this past year. So he's shown, even though he is slightly smaller in stature, that he is a capable rusher of the ball. So I'd love to see him land in a situation where, as I say, he's kind of in that Tony Pollard role rather than just somebody that's going to come on third downs, because I don't think that's the key area that he's going to excel in. So yeah, I think landing spot's going to be a big part for me on how I evaluate Spears after the NFL draft.
Yeah, absolutely. And moving from Spears to another slightly diminutive back, shall we say, Chase Brown. He's currently the RB12 in ADP. Is he a guy that you think has got some potential that he could carve out a genuine role at the next level?
Yeah, again, this is another guy that is labelled as a sleeper, but I think after the combine is where he's kind of lost that sleeper appeal, because everyone was talking about him after the combine running a 4.43 in the 40-yard vertical, which was a 40-inch vertical, which was first. The broad jump 10.7, which was first. Bench 25, first again amongst running backs. So he's a guy that absolutely dominated the combine. I think that's really got him on people's radars, because to be honest, it was kind of like that for me. He wasn't a guy that I was super enthralled by, somebody that I was looking at a lot before the combine. But when I saw those kind of numbers and obviously what he's done in college and in this past year, he's a guy that's really stood out to me and started to rise up my board. Like we've touched upon, the athleticism that he's got. You look at the elusiveness as well, 83 missed tackles, which again ranked third amongst the running backs this past year in the NCAA, second amongst the 2023 running backs, only behind Bijan Robinson. So that just goes to show again the elusiveness that he's got. I think maybe the one thing that maybe people might pick up on and say, why was this such a late breakout? I mean, you look at the college career that he's had starting at Western Michigan. Obviously had a bit of a down year to start his career, then transferred over to Illinois and didn't really get productive until that 2021 season moving into the 2022 season. But actually, when you look a little bit deeper at why it took him so long to get going, I mean, I think there was a lot of issues with the transfer from Western Michigan to Illinois. And that kind of 2019 season, I think he took that as a red shirt. He didn't really play too much in that, just a few attempts. And then obviously there was the COVID issue in 2020. So again, that was another disruptive season. So really, I don't think you can blame it all on Chase Brown for why he couldn't really break out until later on in his career. So I think people are going to use that, and obviously the age as well being, I think he's just turned 23 these last couple of weeks. So a slightly older running back in terms of the prospects. But I think on the whole, the excitement with again, this is going to be a little bit like Tyjae Spears with the elusiveness, with those big plays that he can do with that athleticism. He's a guy that, again, you're going to see quite a few clips if he does get the opportunity on the NFL field. But I do just worry what kind of draft capital he's going to get, as I say, a little slightly older prospect. But on the whole, yeah, another really interesting guy to look forward to.
Yeah, absolutely. I typically don't like talking about landing spot, as I don't believe it pays too much in significance. But I guess I'm going to do it again with Chase Brown after just doing it with Tyjae Spears. But I honestly believe perhaps it's not landing spot, maybe it's more scheme dependent. I honestly think that if Chase Brown lands in a outside zone heavy, whether it be a Shanahan, McVay style scheme where he can be a one-cut runner with that elite speed, that elite top ends kind of athleticism, I think he could be an absolute steal. Now, I don't think he's going to be a superstar in terms of plug and play for fantasy, but I would not be shocked if he's Elijah Mitchell 2.0. You put them next to each other in terms of measurables, they're very similar. You put them next to each other in terms of their kind of play, it is that fast one-cut style. You know, if Chase Brown goes early day 3 to the Miami Dolphins, that's going to be an absolute steal for fantasy because he's perfect fit there. I've got some slight concerns about him as a receiver. I think he's, it's similar to Tyjae Spears again, isn't it? You don't really see him utilised. He's almost an add-on to the game rather than somebody that you're trying to get the ball at in the receiving game. It's those checkdowns and screens and things like that. But yeah, there's a lot to like there. Slightly smaller size, as you said, slightly older prospect, been in college a long time. Yes, we've had some issues. He was an early enrollee. Obviously, had the issues coming out of Western Michigan and then COVID. But I think there is something there that I really like. And if there's any world where he sneaks into the back end of day 2, I'm going to have a lot of Chase Brown. And, as I said, if he ends up in one of those Shanahan tree environments, I'd be really excited about his prospects as potentially a kind of a round 3 onwards lottery ticket. I think there's a lot to like there potentially.
Yeah, no, you absolutely nailed it. I think that is the one landing spot if you're going to pick any for Chase Brown, landing with the Dolphins, and obviously that kind of scheme, like you touched upon, his main strength is obviously using that athleticism, getting to the outsides and that one cut and he's gone. So that'd be an ideal landing spot. And I think, like you mentioned, we don't really like to say landing spots are too important. We like to trust the talent and always bet on the talent over the landing spot. But I think with running backs, especially guys like this, that's slightly older, maybe this could be his one shot, really, this rookie contract. And then beyond that, maybe we don't see too much from Chase Brown. So he's got to really excel and hit the ground running, to say the least. So, yeah, I think the landing spot's going to be key for somebody like Chase Brown with his the side of his game that he excels at. So, again, yeah, this is one that you definitely got to keep an eye out for in the NFL draft. And I think right now, if you're doing your rookie drafts early, before the NFL draft, this is a guy that we could be talking in a month's time after the NFL draft. His value is going to shoot up because if he lands in that, like I mentioned, that ideal landing spot, yeah, I think people are going to get super excited about Chase Brown.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I'm already pretty excited. He's currently my RB7. I've got him ahead of the likes of Condre Miller, Sean Tucker, Roshan Johnson, Zach Evans. Like, there's some big names that I've got him ahead of because I'm really excited about his potential.
Yeah.
One other guy that I've got him ahead of, another diminutive back. It feels like there's a theme here, Matt, with a lot of our sleepers. Deuce Vaughn. I mean, if you're talking just from a production profile perspective, Deuce Vaughn's arguably the best in this class and probably in the conversation with Bijan Robinson. The challenge is that he is tiny, and when I say tiny, I mean like pocket rocket type tiny. He's Scrappy Doo-esque. I think he's what are we talking, 5'5", 179 pounds? Like that's, there's bigger players in high school than that. Are you a believer that Deuce Vaughn can do something at the next level, or do you think that size is going to seriously limit him?
I knew that you were going to talk about Deuce Vaughn, Rich, because I know that you're obviously analytically minded a little bit like myself, and obviously you've got your RB models and stuff. And this is a guy that I've recently just started trying to create my own model, and yeah, he hit instantly, because you mentioned about that production that he's had, especially in the last couple of years, pretty much 1,500 rushing yards back to back. The amount of touchdowns he's got, he is a guy that's excelled in the rushing game. And then you look at the receiving side of it as well. Well over 100 receptions in the 3 years in college. So in terms of production, I mean, this is like elite production in terms of what he's managed to do. But as you said, the one thing that I think is always going to be held against him is that size. He is small. And when you mentioned about how small he is, yeah, you said about there's guys in high schools. I'd probably say there's guys in kindergarten that are probably bigger than what Deuce Vaughn is, because yeah, it's the one thing you notice when you watch the film. You just see how small he is. It doesn't help the fact that he's obviously standing alongside tall quarterbacks, tall offensive linemen, but yeah, he looks absolutely tiny in the backfield. I do just worry moving into the NFL. We always talk about it's a completely different beast going from college football to the NFL. And while his production's obviously been fantastic in college, I do just worry about the wear and tear in the NFL. I'm not trying to say that he's injury prone, because I don't think anyone really is injury prone at this stage, but you've just got to have question marks about that size. And is that going to be held against him in terms of the NFL draft? A team's going to be concerned that taking a running back this small, that I think he can be used in a variety of ways, like I've touched upon, his rushing production and his receiving production. So I think he's definitely got a role in him in terms of being that third down back. I know watching the film, the one game that really stood out to me was the Sugar Bowl against Alabama, going up against, obviously, we know what a strong defense and a team as a whole, Alabama, on the fact that he had over 133 rushing yards at a touchdown against Alabama shows that it can be done. He can compete against these top level defenses, but yeah, I think that size is going to be held against him. And then the combine as well, he didn't really excel. A guy this small, you kind of want him to stand out in the combine, and he didn't really. His vertical was pretty average at 35.5 inches. The broad jump, 9'8", which was last amongst running backs. Obviously the bench, I don't really look too much at the bench, but 17 last amongst running backs. Didn't run a 40. I believe he ran at the pro day, and they were saying that was around a 4.5, I think, at the pro day, which is okay, I guess. But again, when you've got this smaller back, you kind of you expect speed, don't you, from the smaller backs? You think you're not going to have the size to bully defenders. So I think you've got to have that speed. And I do just worry that he hasn't quite got that wow factor in terms of his explosiveness and the strength and what he can do in the NFL. So I do just worry how the NFL view him and how that moves forward once he is selected and playing games in the NFL.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting you talk about the size, and I think the size is absolutely a conversation point. It's important at running back, probably more than most other positions. But the biggest concern with size is durability. And whilst, yes, I appreciate he's not playing in the SEC, he's still playing in a Power 5 conference. Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think he missed any time at all throughout his entire college career, which, that says something to me. It's not like he was a scat back that was getting 100 touches a year. You look on the screen there, this last year he had 291 carries plus had 43 receptions on top of that. Like that's a serious workload, and he carried it well. He didn't get injured, he didn't have to leave the field, he didn't miss games. And I think that is reassuring. I appreciate the NFL is a step up in terms of physicality, but I'm not, I am concerned about the size, but I'm not overly concerned from a durability standpoint. The thing that I love about Deuce Vaughn is that I guess I'm looking at him as, when we're in this third, fourth round of rookie drafts, I'm looking at floor and ceiling and kind of where the combination is. And normally there's a lot of boom bust players in this type of range that have got really high ceilings or decent ceilings, but also got really low floors. That's why they're third or fourth round picks and not going earlier. With Deuce Vaughn, I think he's actually got a solid floor, because worst case scenario, I think he's a competent third down back. I think that you can see on the screen here, we're talking as a freshman, he had 25% targets per route run. In his sophomore year, it's 27.4. Like those are elite wide receiver numbers. He got heavily targeted. You look at the ADOT, normally a running back is around 0. Anything in the negative means basically they were checked down Charlies. He's 3-4 yards ADOT, which doesn't sound massive, but if you're catching, 2-3 catches a game behind the line of scrimmage on checkdowns and screens, it pulls your ADOT down very quickly. So the fact that he's got a positive ADOT shows, and you plug on the tape, and he does get flexed out wide. He does run proper routes, and he is a player that can be used as a slot receiver. And that says to me, worst case scenario, Deuce Vaughn is a third down back that can contribute on special teams and hangs around in the NFL. Well, that to me says he's got potentially situational flex appeal as a worst case scenario. You add into that the fact that there's a chance that he could take what he's done in college and be a 3-down back in the NFL. There's a decent ceiling there. And that says to me, if I'm weighing up guys in this 3rd, 4th round, I'm looking at that floor ceiling. And if I'm saying he's got a higher floor than most people around him, and he's still got that ceiling, then I'm absolutely intrigued. And yeah, if I only end up with a 3rd down back that is kind of a roster clogger that I can never start, well, is that any worse than most of the 3rd, 4th round picks that you're going to spend? Because that's basically what they end up being, isn't it? There's not many 3rd or 4th round picks that become reliable, startable fantasy options.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, like you mentioned, the fact that he has been so productive and managed to handle such a large workload goes to show that if he goes into the NFL and he's kind of penciled in to be that 3rd down running back, if he does land in that situation, but anything were to happen to the starter, if he is the 1B, if anything were to happen to the 1A, and he gets that opportunity in the rushing game, I think he can prove himself when he gets that opportunity. And that's the kind of running backs that I like to target when going for these sleepers, these later round targets, is guys that, yeah, they can do both. They might not start doing both. They might just be, okay, one might be primarily used as a rusher, but he's got that receiving game to him. If he then gets that opportunity, he can then excel in that, and that can then expand the value, expand the role that he gets in the NFL. So these are like the ideal targets that I look for. And I think, like we've touched on, the only real thing you can put against Deuce Vaughn is his size, really. And if he can go into, like you mentioned, he's handled a heavy workload in college. So if he can go into the NFL and dispel all those, okay, he's a shorter guy, but if he dispels all that and proves himself, then I mean, what else have we really got to hate on Deuce Vaughn? I think he's exceptional in the rushing and receiving game. So yeah, definitely somebody I'll be targeting later on in my drafts. And again, it's going to be interesting to see if he can maybe sneak into that day 2. That would be ideal. But even as a day 3 running back, I think he's a guy that could get the opportunity, get that spike in value, and then you've got that opportunity to then move on from the running back, because we know that the running back values are the position where you get that immediate spike if they get an opportunity. So yeah, I love targeting running backs in the later rounds in my rookie drafts. And as I say, this is a guy I'll be targeting for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. You talk about potential to sneak into day 2. Look at the model on screen now. So he's a pre-draft model, 87th percentile. That's because of that production profile. Yeah. The post-draft is based on him being a 6th round pick. Mm-hmm. If he was to sneak into the 3rd round, he'd jump up to an 80th percentile prospect. That's in a similar world to Devon Achane and Zach Charbonnet. Like that's where my model would have him as probably the RB5 in this class, but in a tier with 3 and 4, which is mind-blowing because I can't quite believe that it would have him there. But that shows the potential upside that a player like him does have. Yep. Before we move on to the next guy, I'm just keen to remind you, if you're here and you haven't given us a thumbs up, give us that like. What's going on? We're 23 minutes into the video. All it takes is a second. Give us that thumbs up. Give us a click. It really helps. And also, whilst you're there, hit that little subscribe button. So the next guy is a guy I believe you wanted to talk about. Running back 19 in ADP. Keaton Mitchell. Are you a big believer? Is he your kind of true love this year?
I mean, I do have a bit of previous of going for running backs that played for a team in Carolina in college football. I've got previous for this, Rich, with my Michael Carter love, but it's obviously not North Carolina. This is East Carolina, so a bit of a smaller school prospect. And again, these are the kind of guys I get drawn into, Rich. It's hard not to get drawn into these smaller school guys, because when you get a guy at a smaller school, they're obviously standing out. This is a guy that stood out at East Carolina. The production that he's got both in the rushing game and the receiving game over his 3 years there is great to see. Over 450 rushing attempts in his college career, over 3,000 rushing yards, 25 touchdowns, 60 receptions, 580 receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns. As I say, he's a guy that's absolutely dominated But the obvious caveat is going to be it was at a smaller school. But I don't know how you feel about this, Rich, but whenever I get this kind of hit back from these smaller school guys and say, yeah, well, it was all against he was playing for a smaller school. The level of competition was obviously going to be weaker, but I mean, what do you expect from the guy? You play what you put in front of. Surely, I mean, there's no opportunity in that. You've got to play against the players that are put in front of you. So while some people say, yeah, it was weaker competition, I think, well, he's dominated against that level of competition. What's to say that he can't dominate at a high level of competition? And this is kind of why I'm getting sucked into Keaton Mitchell. And then you look at what he did at the Combine. Again, this is another area where I think people started to really get a bit of buzz about Mitchell and start to realise what he was about, because he ran a great 40 time before 3.7, which was third amongst running backs. The vertical jump, 38 inches, which was third. The broad jumps, 10'6", second amongst running backs. So really dominating in the Combine, which was great to see, as I say, from a smaller school guy. And I think the thing that again stood out for me was when you look at the 10-yard split at the 40, it was actually the fastest amongst all running backs at the Combine at that 10-yard split. And I mean, when we talk about the running backs, there's obviously a name there in Devon Achane. He was actually faster than him in terms of that 10-yard split. So everyone bangs on about how excited they are for Achane, and obviously that track pedigree that he's got, and how he was going to be so elite at the Combine. So the fact that he's quicker off the line and that first 10 yards than Achane shows just how explosive he is and what a great athlete he's going to be. So that really excites me, that as I mentioned, the explosiveness. 57 breakaway runs this past year, which is obviously runs over 15 yards. So that's pretty much 1 in 8 with a big run. Again, that's better than guys like Devon Achane, Tyjae Spears, these guys that you label as explosive. So the fact he's being able to do that again it's just really exciting for me, Rich. As I say, he's a smaller school guy, so he's not going to get a great deal of buzz about him. He's going to get the knocks of the level of competition. Again, another guy that could have knocks against his size, only 5'8", 180 pounds. So kind of similar to that Tyjae Spears, maybe Deuce Vaughn as well, but a little bit bigger in height. But yeah, this is a guy that I'm excited to see what kind of draft capital he gets. I'm expecting it to be bad, to be honest, because he is obviously that smaller school guy. There's every chance that this guy could go undrafted. But if he does get into that early day 3, is that a possibility? Then if so, yeah, it's going to be tough for me not to get excited by him. He's got that receiving ability. He's got that rushing ability. Yeah, I can't wait to see what situation he lands in the NFL.
Yeah, I like Mitchell, and I think to go back to your kind of point about scouting smaller school guys, basically when I'm watching the games, I'm looking for, are you absolutely dominating against inferior competition? And yeah, quite frankly, Mitchell did. He was, I want to say the Pirates was their nickname. I'm going to get that wrong. He was their entire offense. You look at some of the kind of key stats: yards per team rush attempt. He was 92nd percentile across all players since 2003 in terms of yards per team rush attempt. That's basically saying he was the entire rushing offense for them. And you saw it week in, week out. The other teams knew where the ball was going, and yet he was still able to produce. And I think that it's a shame he's come out a year early, because normally with these smaller school guys, you get to see him go to the Senior Bowl or the East West Shrine game or things like that, and you get to see him go up against elite competition and bigger school guys, and if they can hold their own. With him, it is a lot of projection because he has come out that year early. But that says to me, someone's obviously talking to him and saying, it's worthwhile you coming out. So maybe the NFL are liking what they see. I really like him as a prospect. I think, yes, it's the same with Deuce Vaughn. He's a first percentile in terms of weight at the running back position since 2003. So yeah, that is a concern. I think he's a potential third down back again because of the size. I don't think he's the route runner that Deuce Vaughn is, but I think he's a better kind of all-round running back. I like him less than kind of the 3 other backs that we've talked about, just because I worry the ceiling. I don't know if, because it's a smaller school, because he is smaller in stature, I don't know if he's going to get the opportunity. But at the point in the draft we're going, 4th round, it's lottery ticket time, and why not take a lottery ticket on a guy that's produced in college, that's got, as you said, really good athletic testing numbers, and hopefully he can hit and do something. But yeah, for me, the way I draft is that when I get to that third, fourth round, I'm basically only drafting running backs anyway. So yeah, he's probably a guy that I'm gonna take plenty of shots on and have quite a few shares come May time.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a transition now and move across to some wide receivers that you wanted to talk about, Matt. The first guy, a guy I feel like there's some Trey Palmer truthers, shall we say, sneaking around. I see some serious love. There's some people that are hyping him up a fair amount. Are you classing yourself as a truther?
I wouldn't label myself quite as a truth. I'm a believer. Can we use that? I'm a believer. I think.
I like that.
I think he's definitely got some talent there. I think, like you mentioned, we obviously spoke a lot about running backs. I think we've got to show a little bit of love to the wide receivers. And this is a guy again that's going super late currently in your drafts. You've got it on there, wide receiver 17 in ADP. So this is a guy that's I'm seeing going in the fourth, maybe even fifth round of rookie drafts at the moment. And again, this is another guy that's really excelled at the combine. I think the main part of Palmer's game, I think a lot of people are going to know the moment that they watch any kind of tape on him is the speed. I mean, the speed is right up there. He was the fastest wide receiver at the NFL combine. The speed is obviously a big talking point for him, but I think he's got a little bit more to his game than maybe what he gets given credit for. I think a lot of people will look at his production in college. He was quite a highly touted prospect coming in as a recruit from high school, and he went over to LSU. Could sadly never really get a role at LSU, but I mean, when you're talking LSU, the guys he was going up against, the Justin Jeffersons, the Jamar Chases, I mean, you've got to be pretty special to dethrone those guys. So you can kind of understand why he maybe didn't get too much role early on at LSU, but he also used quite a lot on special teams, which I think is actually a bit of a positive, and how he could maybe be selected in the NFL. Do NFL teams see that usage in special teams, the ability that it's got as a punt return, as a kick return, and that's then going to give him an opportunity to see the NFL field and hopefully show what he can do when given an opportunity with the ball in his hands. And as I say, with the elite level of speed that he's got, I think the ceiling that he's going to have those boom games for sure. This is a guy, obviously you guys on Fantasy Sanctuary love a bit of best ball. Tom obviously covers all the best ball. If you're in a Dynasty best ball league, then this is a guy for me that I think you've got to target, because I would be shocked if he doesn't have those big boom games. I mean, I can picture a dream scenario, lands at the LA Chargers, obviously crying out for a speedster over there. If he lands there with Justin Herbert throwing him the ball, then yeah, he's going to have those boom games for sure. And Tom's going to fall in love with him. We know his love for MVS. This is that kind of boom player that I think Tom's going to absolutely fall in love with. But you kind of pencil him and label him as that go route kind of guy. But when you actually look at where he was lined up when he moved over to Nebraska, especially, but obviously at LSU as well, he actually played quite a lot in the slot. I think he mainly played in the slot at LSU, and it was only when he went to Nebraska that they kind of put him a bit in the slot, a bit out wide. So I think that shows that he can actually be used in more than one way than just that vertical go guy and using that speed. So all in all, I think the NFL, how they view him is going to be critical to obviously the draft capital and how we then view him in terms of what he can do in fantasy. But I really like him as a sleeper, somebody that's kind of underrated. People don't really know what his game is. Maybe when you just look at the stats and the speed, you just put one and one together. And I think maybe they're getting three instead of two, because I think he can be used in a variety of different ways. So yeah, a guy that I'm looking forward to see get selected in the NFL and his role moving forward.
Yeah, I think you have to start and talk about the speed, don't you? You know, that is the clear thing that pops off the page. I think that to class him as a pure burner is probably a bit harsh. I think he's got more nuance to his route running than perhaps you'd think. I think his hesitation move on a deep go is absolutely filthy, and the amount of times he destroyed corners with a little hesitation, getting to stop their feet, and then boom, he's gone. It's unbelievable. I think that he's going to stick around in the NFL because, you know, you talked about LSU. He had plenty of special teams ability. He's going to be used as a gunner. He's going to get used, whether it's on kick returns, punt returns. Like, he's got that ability. He's going to stick around as a member of the 53, and that's going to allow him an opportunity to round out and potentially, you know, as you said, have those boom weeks. I think that my concern is a physicality thing. You know, he's got decent size in terms of 6 foot. 192, but I did see him at times struggle when corners got more physical. You mentioned Nebraska moved him in out of the slot quite a lot. I think that was to get him that free release, and I worry that, yeah, you know, in the NFL he can get schemed up a free release very easily, but if you stick him on the Chargers, are we going to line him up in the slot and move Keenan Allen out wide, or are we going to let Keenan Allen keep running out the slot and expect Trey Palmer to develop a release package? And at the moment, I don't know if that's there, but you can't look at what he did this last season and not be excited. You see on the screen there, 46.15% dominator rating. Like, that's absolutely mind-blowing. It was an incredible year. He was a really good prospect. He's got good athleticism. I think his hands are good. I think he tracks the ball well on the deep threat. It's, there's a lot to like. I think I agree with you in that he's probably better for best ball, because I do think he's going to be one of those guys that, he'll probably have 3 or 4 boom weeks a season, but trying to predict when they're going to be is going to be tough. So maybe as an end of the bench stash in best ball, he's probably a lot better than maybe turns into a bit of a roster clogger that's too good to drop because he has those 3 or 4 weeks, but you never feel comfortable sticking him in a flex because he could equally go 3 targets for 0 receptions or something like that. So like the player, plenty to get excited about, but I do think that physicality could be his Achilles heel as such. So the last guy that you wanted to talk about, I'm going to let you pronounce his name. It's he's a bit of a journeyman. Ended up at BYU where he truly broke out. Are you a big fan, or was it just the name that you wanted to?
I'll put the name out there for you. It's Puka Nacua. That is the name of the guy we're going to be talking about. Played over at, like you mentioned, BYU, but started over in Washington. I'll be honest, Rich, this is when you spoke about a little earlier with Trey Palmer, a truther. I think this is the player that I'm a truthful. This is the guy that I'm going to be super excited seeing where he lands in the NFL, what kind of draft capital he gets, because he's a guy that I've been following ever since the beginning of this offseason. On Twitter, I do my under the radar rookies, and this was like the second guy that I looked at, and immediately I fell in love with him. I always get a soft spot for these guys that aren't just the prototypical wide receiver, the kind of that gadget player, which I know doesn't get a great reputation in fantasy. You think of guys like Tavon Austin, but I mean, I really like these guys that aren't just that prototypical wide receiver. He's a guy that can be used in the rushing game, in screen passes, in jet sweeps. He can do it all basically, but not just that. I had this discussion with our good friend Evan Brown on his podcast, and he was kind of saying that, is Puka Nacua getting these opportunities because he's not good enough to be that outside wide receiver? Where I view it as, I think he's that good that they want to get the ball in his hands as much as possible. I mean, you just look at the yards per reception, the yards per route run. He's right up there with amongst some of the best in terms of what he can do, and on yards per route run is I think he was second best amongst this year's eligible wide receivers. So he's a guy that it shows me when he's got that opportunity, when he's on the field, he can do amazing things when he got the ball in his hands. The one knock that I will put against him is the fact of keeping him on the field has been the biggest issue in his college career. He's been marred by injuries throughout his career. He had a broken ankle early on at Washington, and then, like we touched upon, moved over to BYU, and again just couldn't really get into the swing of things. Kind of just getting those constant injuries that are holding him back, but. He's a guy that I'm super excited about. I feel like the NFL are coming around to him as well. When he went to the combine, I heard reports that he really impressed in his interviews that he did. You watch the film on him, and I think, again, he's a guy that teams are going to fall in love with because he's such a competitor. His physicality when it comes to the catch point is something that stands out to me when he is lined out wide and in those contested catch situations. So, yeah, he's a guy that the all-round game I love. You're going to see, if you search his name on Twitter, you're going to see a lot of these Deebo Samuel kind of comps. I'm not quite sure I'm at that level that he's going to be the next Deebo Samuel, but I do kind of understand it with obviously the rushing ability that he's got, the receiving ability that he's got. So, a guy I'm really excited to see where he lands. Your argument is that I think that the landing spot could be crucial. We want him to be in that situation where he is schemed to be used in with the jet sweeps, the screens, because that is where he's excelled at college. So, another guy that I'm super excited to see where he lands. Please let him get that solid draft capital, and then I can feel justified to have love for Puka Nacua. But even if he don't, Rich, to be honest, I'm still going to be in on him.
Yeah, I like him more as an NFL receiver than a fantasy receiver, I think is going to be my take. I think that you talked about his physicality. I think in terms of intangibles, he does it all. You're not going to find a more willing, more physical blocker in this draft than him. You know, his ability to go in and mix it up. I think you could easily see him used in a big slot capacity because of that blocking ability. Something like, you know, you saw Juju use last year with the Chiefs, or something like that, where because he is a good blocker and he's going to be a good blocker the second he steps in the NFL field, he's going to have a role. I think that where he struggles is that you just look at his pure counting stats. You know, you look at last year, 9 games, 67 targets, 625 yards, 5 touchdowns. That doesn't scream like superstar, but then you look at the advanced numbers, as you said, 3.53 yards per route run, 37.9 targets per route run. Like, it's mad. The reason his counting numbers look so poor is that BYU basically didn't really throw the ball very much, and he wasn't on the field for running routes, basically. So I think that there's a lot to like. I think that he's a guy that I think is going to be, as I said, better for the NFL than fantasy, because I just don't know if he's going to be able to command significant enough volume in the NFL, because I don't think he's a good enough athlete to be utilized in that Deebo Samuel role. I know you're talking up the potential, and I get that. Yeah, it could be there where he's used in those gadget plays, but I just don't know if he's good enough with the ball in his hands to command being forced those touches at an NFL level. The biggest concern I have, having said all that, is that I think he is a really poor route runner. I think that, unfortunately, he doesn't understand how to set up defenders. He's not, good in terms of slowing his feet down, breaking, making cuts. He rounds off so many of his routes. And that means that he doesn't create separation, which is then why he has to rely on the contested catches, which, yes, fine, he is very good contested catch receiver, but I'd much rather see a guy that can consistently get open and not have to rely on those contested catches. So hopefully, his blocking ability, his physical nature allows him to stick around in the NFL long enough that he can round out his game and improve the route running and that side of things. But I think there's definitely a little bit of work to be had, shall we say, that will hopefully allow him to potentially be fantasy relevant. But yeah, I'm not a huge believer myself. Sorry to disagree and disappoint, Matt.
I mean, if you want to miss the train, Rich, that's perfectly fine. But I'm starting this train up early, and I mean, if anybody wants to jump on with me, I mean, I think you've got to get on now, Rich. I think I'm super excited to see what you can do in the NFL. And as I say, I think leading up to the NFL draft, he's the one guy I'm going to be keeping a close eye on and seeing where he lands and at what point of the NFL draft. Hopefully in the NFL. I mean, this could all be erased if he goes undrafted, because
that's it, isn't it?
I'll be deleting those tweets pretty quick.
As we said, he's wide receiver 24 and ADP. Like, you're not spending a lot of capital to go out and get him, are you? It's a fairly cheap buy. It's a fairly cheap kind of draft that you're not burning a lot of resources to go out and get him. So yeah, I'm not on board. I'm not sure I'm going to get on board, Matt, but I'm very happy for you to come on board next year and slate me when I'm clearly wrong. And Puka Nacua is a superstar. So yeah, but thank you ever so much for coming on, Matt. It's been absolutely fantastic. I love talking through these guys. As you said at the beginning, you do dig deeper the most, and I love to hear your thoughts and on some of these sleepers. Remind the people listening where can they find you? Where can they find your work?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Matt F Dynasty. That's where I do all my written content, and then obviously, like you mentioned at the start, I do a podcast with my good friends Kevin Ali, Fantasy Wildcard. We do our Dynasty show over there. So yeah, if you want to listen to some more UK guys talking a bit of Dynasty, you can follow us on Twitter at Wildcard Dynasty. And yeah, thanks again for having me on, Rich. It's been an absolute pleasure as always talking to you. And let's just hope that Puka Nacua hits, because I'll be back with a vengeance next year, bigging that one up and doing my victory laps all over Twitter.
I look forward to it. Well, thank you so much for joining. It's been awesome having you on. And yeah, as I said earlier, if you're not following, make sure you drop a like, make sure you give us a subscribe, and we'll see you again soon.